In this clip, we're going to take a look at a practical example for using UI elements. So let's go ahead and start right up here at the top. We'll first need to make sure that we have an event system in the scene. In this case, we've had an event system because we've been using it for navigation. Now there is one little thing that we need to make sure that we do. If your event system has a button here at the bottom and it's asking you to create some input modules, go ahead and click on that just to make sure that you get this particular component. So now that we've done that, let's go to create empty, and I'm going to reset the position on this. And this is going to be our dialog system object. Now this game object is not necessarily the actual dialog object or game object, the dialog box. This is actually going to be the manager that manages the scripts and gets everything ready. So you can leave this at the bottom. Typically I drag these all the way up to the top just so that way I can keep track of the different systems. So on this, we could go ahead and add a script component to this, and I would call this dialog system. Now I've provided these scripts to you just so that way we can focus on just the UI itself. Now on this, you'll see that we're waiting for a dialog panel object to be tied to it. So we need to go ahead and recreate our canvas and then all of the components that go into that. And the purpose of this particular clip is to show you how to order things together and show you that parenting is going to be really important with all of this. So to get started with this, let's go ahead and create a UI canvas. With this canvas created, we can go ahead and create a UI panel. And I typically use panels to create some sort of layout or get things ready. And so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and just drag this down to about where I want it to be here. And then I'm going to hold down Alt after I start dragging. And then I'm going to bring this into about here. So that feels pretty good. I'm going to also bring it off the bottom of that. And let's try to drag that there. There we go. Just so that way we're not fully resting on the bottom of the screen. So now with this in place, I'm going to go ahead and change it to where the alpha is all the way down to black so we can't actually see that particular object. And we're going to call this dialog box. Okay. And this is basically the main parent for this particular element. Now on this, we're also going to create another UI panel, and we're going to call this dialog box, and then this one dialog panel. This is going to just serve as the object here. Okay, so then let's drag dialog box into here, and then on the dialog box I'm going to go ahead and scale it down into position. And then I need to add the avatar. So I'm going to go to UI, image, so that way I have some sort of image telling me who is actually talking. And we're going to click on the source image, and we're going to choose our dwarf image. Let's drag and drop this here. And I'm actually going to bring it up to the top corner and then scale this down. Hold down Shift to make sure that it constrains, so that way you don't stretch it out. And then let's select the dialog box again, and then grab the left side, and let's drag this across to here. And I want it to rest right up against the avatar. So kind of like that. Make sure that you grab your anchor points and bring those up to the edge of the dialog box itself. Same thing for the avatar. Let's change that to where they match up to the corners, because what I want it to do is I want it to stretch, but I want it to keep the relative size that we have here within the canvas. Let's go ahead and parent that to the dialog box, and I'm going to call this avatar. And then in the dialog box, we're going to change the color of that background. We're going to make it a little bit darker, something like this. And then what we'll do is we will go ahead and add in things like our name text, the actual text that should be writing in there, and then we'll also do a button to continue the dialogue depending on how many lines that we have. So let's just make sure that we have all of our anchor points set really quickly. Here's our panel on that one, and then on the dialog box we're going to create UI, and we're going to do text. On this one I'm going to place it right there, and I'm going to parent it to the dialog box. I'm going to call this name, and then we're going to actually type that into the dialog there. And let's choose white for the color. And then I also want to make sure that it's centered up on the dialog here. I don't want it to be right up against the edge. And we could also move this across here. So just like that. And then what I want to do is I want to tell this to best fit. We'll do a minimum of 4 and a maximum of 14. And what that does is it just whenever this scales, it's going to make sure that the text will still fit inside of this particular dialog box. Now the minimum size will be 4, and so if this squishes down to where the text cannot be seen, that's going to be a little bit of an issue, and we'll have to make an adjustment. But for now, this should be good. With this name, let's go ahead and create a new UI element. Let's do text again, and I'm going to pop this down here and just create enough space for this. Now let's go ahead and hold down Alt while we're dragging this, and I just want to create enough area for the dialog box to be in there without crowding anything. So with this selected, let's go ahead and call this is my dialog text. And this is just a preliminary message. You could really put anything that you want in there. You don't really need anything at all, to be honest. But I like to put something in there. And we're changing the color and everything. And that should be good. Now the final thing that we'll need to do, let's go ahead and make sure that that dialog does not go beyond our button as well. And we may actually make this a little bit smaller. And let's go ahead and put a button below this. So on this text, let's go ahead and parent that to the dialog box, and then we'll create a UI element button. And I'm going to go ahead and call this continue button. And let's drag and drop that under the dialog box. And on this continue button, I'm just going to put it right down here at the bottom and try to center that up. Now I can resize that however I see fit. And let's go ahead and change the text that's inside of that by going to text and expanding that continue button. And we'll say continue. And let's do best fit, minimum of 4 and a max of 14. And we'll leave the colors alone. Now with this is all set. And there's a couple of things that we'll need to watch out for whenever we have all of these objects set. The first thing is our anchor points. So we want to make sure that those things will scale as we intend them to scale. Okay, so check all of your elements. And all we're doing is we're moving them to the bounds. And that's just ensuring that they stay in place, but then they also scale with the canvas itself in relation to themselves. Okay. There we go. And so Just looking at all of these elements, we should see that. That looks good. All right. So now all of that is set. Make sure that on your button you have interactable checked, and then also raycast target checked on the image itself. That just allows us to press the button much easier. On the text, we can go ahead and we can leave these just as they are. And the dialog box is good here. However, on the dialog box, I would actually like to turn off raycast target. That just ensures that I can't click on this box here on the dialog. And then dialog panel, I think everything looks good here. And then on our canvas, everything looks good there. Now on the canvas, you have this component called Graphic Raycaster. This just ensures that you can actually click onto the canvas itself. So now that everything is set, what I would like to do is come up to the Battle Dummy object, and I would like to add a couple of components. The first one is going to be a capsule collider component. And let's modify the center of this to 1, and then let's add a height of 2 to this. And that just ensures that we have a capsule collider that is the size of the object and that we can actually click on it. And then I want to add a component called NPC. And this is a script that allows us to click on objects that would have some sort of dialogue. And so in this case, I'm going to add just a single line of code or a single line of dialogue, and then we'll add in the message in element 0. And I'm going to say, you are the dummy. So now what should happen whenever we play the game is that our dialog box should not appear. But whenever we click on the NPC and we move over to it, and once we get within a certain distance and stop, then our dialog box will pop up, and then we should be able to click on the continue button to end it. So let's hit play. And you'll see here that we're getting a couple of errors, and you can see here that we forgot to also anchor down our avatar. So let's take care of the avatar really quickly. Anytime that you do any reparenting on components like this in your UI, make sure that you reset the anchor points because they will reposition themselves. Now let's take a look at the issue with our script. Here it's saying it's having a problem finding dialog box, and the reason for that is probably because we forgot to assign the dialog panel object to this variable. Now this is an exposed variable, and so we need to drag and drop it onto our dialog system. So if I click on dialog system, you can see dialog panel here, and it's set to none. So what I need to do is I need to go down to my dialog panel, left click and drag that onto that game object. Now if I come in and hit play, that error should be gone. Now in this case, it looks like we have a new one. Double click on this and it's saying, okay, we're having a hard time finding the continue button. Now in this case, the continue button should be fine, but it looks like perhaps we didn't put it in the right place. So let's take a look at where that is located. There's a continue button. It is under the dialog box, and it should actually be under the dialog panel. So let's left click and drag that there. Remember to reset your anchor points whenever you make any changes to the overall parenting of these UI elements. And so now if I hit play, you'll see that it has disappeared, and so it's waiting for us to interact with our NPC or something like that. We'll click on that NPC, and here you can see that that does come up. One issue is we see that the name does not come up here, and that's because we didn't actually fill in that name. But if we go ahead and click continue, you'll see that the dialog box disappears, and we can go back to playing the game. So under this, if we go to the NPC, and that was Battle Dummy, you'll see that we forgot to fill in the name. So I'll actually just call this Battle Dummy and hit enter. So now if we go ahead and test this again, let's click on our MVC, and now we see the name show up of that and then the actual message. So you can see here that scripts allow us to change things like text, and we can create a dialogue system based on this. Now we're not going to go into that portion because we have an entire course that's dedicated to UI elements, and you can check that out. It's called UI Fundamentals in Unity. So check that out and learn more about this particular set of tools that can be very, very helpful. So now that we've finished this module, let's go ahead and move on to building games.